the evidence, the proof that we're seeing the end of Israel's economy, which would spell the end of Israel as we know it, which would also spell the end of genocide, which is a good thing. I'm going to put that down. I'm going to jot that down right now as a good thing. And for those of you who are regular viewers, you may go, well, I already saw that you covered how a bunch of businesses in Israel have collapsed. In fact, that number is 46,000 businesses across Israel have collapsed since October 7th because of Israel's actions. Not because of what happened on October 7th, because of everything Israel has done since October 7th and some on October 7th. That is why 46,000 businesses have collapsed in Israel. And they're estimating it's going to be 65,000 have collapsed across Israel by the end of the year. I already brought you that, but it's actually much larger than just that. And that's why this is not the same story I brought you the other day, but instead a larger story. It's from Mondo Vice. They do great work. The end of Israel's economy. No state on earth, it says, has been able to inflict so much damage to the Israeli economy as the state of Israel itself. And the result is growing indications that the Israeli economy has reached an impasse with no path forward as long as the state remains an apartheid Zionist state rejected by the whole world except the US and Germany. And you may say, well, it's not rejected by everybody. You know, there's also Canada and to some degree Britain. And yeah, but in many ways, they're vassal states to the United States. So really, the only two propping up the U.S. are the U.S. empire and Germany, although I'd argue Germany is also a vassal state to the United States. But anyway, if you look at the UN votes, it really is just the U.S. that's stopping the UN from 100% voting against Israel. Estimates by the UN are that 70% of the houses in Gaza have been destroyed. I'm not going to go through all the Gaza numbers because you already know them, but it also talks about 40,000 Palestinians being murdered, 15,000 of those children, 146,000 additional Palestinians to die in the coming months from health complications due to injury, starvation, disease. So 70% of the houses have been destroyed. The rubble, the UN estimates, will take 15 years to clear, just to clear, not to rebuild, just to clear. Then it continues. The economic indicators speak of nothing less than an economic catastrophe in Israel, not for Gaza. Obviously, Gaza is not doing well, but this is for Israel. Over 46,000 businesses have gone bankrupt. Tourism has essentially stopped. Israel's credit rating was lowered. Israeli bonds are sold at the prices of almost junk bonds. And the foreign investments that have already dropped by 60% in the first quarter of 2023 show no prospects of recovery. Dropped by 60%. Foreign investments have. And also tourism, which I just mentioned, which has collapsed, was a major component of the Israeli economy. The majority of the money invested in Israeli investment funds was diverted to investments abroad because Israelis do not want their own pension funds and insurance funds on their own savings to be tied up in the fate of their own state, which they know is committing a genocide and is in cataclysmic times. This has caused a surprising stability in the Israeli stock market because funds invested in foreign stocks and bonds generated profit in foreign currency, which was multiplied by the rise in the exchange rate between foreign currencies in the Israeli shekel. But then Intel, obviously a major corporation, scuttled a $25 billion investment plan in Israel, the biggest BDS victory ever. They ended a $25 billion plan to invest in Israel, and that was due to boycott, divest, and sanctions. Most of you, of course, know about BDS. BDS, incredibly important. I have talked a lot about how important BDS is and how we should all be involved in boycotting companies connected to Israel in order to stop their genocide. To continue from the article, these are all financial indicators, but the crisis strikes deeper at the means of production of the Israeli economy. Israel's power grid, which has largely switched to natural gas, still depends on coal to supply the demand. The biggest supplier of coal to Israel is Colombia, which announced that it would suspend coal shipments to Israel as long as the genocide was ongoing. After Colombia, the next two biggest suppliers are South Africa and Russia, both of which you may know, are showing signs of also cutting off a lot of their cooperation with Israel because they are opposed to the genocide. Without reliable and continuous electricity, Israel will no longer be able to pretend to be a developed economy. Server farms do not work without 24-hour power, and no one knows how many blackouts the Israeli high-tech sector could potentially survive. International tech companies have already started closing their branches in Israel. I mean, this is everything. This is everything the Israeli economy is all just sinking. And it's due to their own behavior. It's due to the fact that they're committing genocide. It's due to the fact that they are just obliterating a whole society and acting like it's morally okay. So they're doing it to themselves, which is kind of fascinating because this is kind of what Hamas wanted, right? For Israel to collapse and no longer be able to imprison them in an open air prison and have 5,000 hostages pre-October 7th, etc. It's what Hamas wanted, but this is all due to Israel's actions. This is not due to Hamas's actions. This is due to Israel's actions. This is due to Israel's genocide. Israeli newspapers are full of articles about the exodus of educated Israelis leaving the country. Professor Dan Ben David, a famous economist, argued that the Israeli economy is held together by just 300,000 people, the senior staff in universities, tech companies, and hospitals. Once a significant portion of these people leaves, he says, we won't become a third world country. We just won't be anymore. Because obviously, in order to be this, high-tech, sophisticated society that Israel, brags about being, you have to have pretty high-level people, very smart and educated people. And those are also the people that often tend to see the writing on the wall and flee a sinking ship. They say the estimates of the number of Israelis who have already left varies wildly because it is tough to know, like, how many are just taking long vacations abroad, which apparently is a big thing right now for Israelis, thinking they can wait it out and then go back afterwards. But so far, there's been no afterwards. So how many have actually fled and will never come back is very unclear. The two sectors of the Israeli economy that do not report a crash are the arms companies, big surprise, which are reporting high sales, you think? And the exits, which is not a term I had heard before, as in EXITS, the exits, as international corporations scavenge the carcasses of Israel's tech sector looking for bargains. I don't know if exits is a standard financial term, and I'm just a moron for not knowing it. But anyway, even Google expressed interest in buying the Israeli cybersecurity company Wiz, founded by Israeli intelligence officers who are eager to sell their company to Google in order to be able to leave Israel. So yet again, a top Israeli company chomping at the bit to get the hell out. In the age of the information economy, the economic prospects of states are neither determined by raw materials nor the quality of the workforce. And this is an interesting point and an important one about just the reality of successful states in general nowadays. They argue in this article, instead, we live in an era of economy of expectations. And this also goes for individual companies. They're pretty much the same. Individual companies now are often successful off of expectations. And Tesla is the perfect example of this. Elon Musk is the perfect example of this. Most of what has been achieved, quote unquote, by Tesla and by the other companies that Elon Musk has been the head of is actually about expectations and about how much he can keep his name in the news and that kind of thing. It's not that much about how much they've produced. Now, Tesla, the car company, part of his empire, is doing pretty well nowadays, but it only became profitable a few years ago. Most of the money that Tesla was making before that was due to selling carbon offsets rather than actually producing anything. And so the fact that Tesla's stock, I don't know if it still is, but for a long time was worth more than all of the big four automakers combined, had a lot to do with the economy of expectations and the fact that it's about keeping your name, both the name of the company, the name of Elon Musk, etc., at the top of newspapers and websites, etc. And then people invest in the stock, which is a Ponzi scheme, etc. And it all goes off of that. So when you have Israel collapsing in this way, it's the reverse. Their economy has nothing because there are no expectations. This is a genocidal maniac country committing genocide and people fleeing from Israel, not out of safety, but out of, not out of fear for the tiny Hamas rocket that occasionally hits, but out of fear for what Israel's doing to their own society. I suppose there may be some fear of Iran attacks and Hezbollah, depending on what part of Israel you live in, but that's not, for the most part, Tel Aviv. Although they did, Yemen hit Tel Aviv recently. The hype of Israel's startup nation, quote unquote, has turned into shutdown nation. Two senior Israeli economists, Eugene Kendall and Ron Sur, published a secret report in which they predict that Israel will not survive to its 100th year. And I'd say that's absolutely true. How can you be just an utterly genocidal nation and expect to survive? The only reason Israel has survived even to this point, at least in this form of a genocidal oppressive regime, is because of the help of the United States and the propaganda of the United States and the propaganda of Israel in the United States. It's a combination of lies, money, and guns, which sounds like a good weekend, good 3-day weekend, I'll be honest, but not good for a nation state long term. Good for a little while. To wrap up this article, 3 Israeli historians, 2 Zionists and 1 anti-Zionist, so both sides of the spectrum, have declared that the Zionist project has come to an end. When a critical mass of Israelis, regardless of their political opinions, become convinced that Israeli apartheid has become unsustainable, they will no longer agree to invest energy and money and risk their lives and their families for the sake of the Zionist project. They will seek out a better future for themselves, as every sane person would, either by leaving Israel or, better yet, by working towards a new and democratic political system in Palestine. One person, one vote, and a future in which everyone of every religion and ethnicity can have a state. Because Israel is this settler colonial state that was created by stealing land, and because everybody living there, by definition, unless you're Palestinian, and what was it, 4% were Jewish pre-Israel in that area, so almost everyone, maybe not every, but just about everybody there in Israel is either, first generation or second generation. Their grandparents immigrated there, with very few exceptions, tiny number of exceptions. 4%, 6%, something like that. That means that their ties to that area are not as strong as someone who's been living in, Italy for 400 years. My family's been here for 400 years, 1,000 years. I'm not leaving here unless you kill me. So most of these groups have connections elsewhere. They have connections in Russia and in America. And hell, Netanyahu's American. I mean, Netanyahu grew up in Pennsylvania, went to MIT, worked at Boston Consulting Group or whatever, and he's an American. Changed his last name to sound more Israeli rather than Polish. So it just makes it easier for a lot of these people with dual citizenship. It just makes it easier for Israelis to leave, and a lot of them begin thinking about what's safest for their family, which is hilarious because the idea of Israel, when it was first founded, was, well, this is the only way Jews are going to be safe, which is a dumb idea, but that was the concept that they went with. And every time Biden says that, with no Israel, then Jews aren't safe anywhere. And it's like, really? You're planning on killing us sometime soon? Is that what you're saying, Biden? But this is an epic story, this aspect of it. And this should be all over the mainstream media if they weren't cowards and pathetic assholes. As Israel is utterly obliterating and committing genocide across Gaza, they're killing Israel. They're killing the nation of Israel. This is the death knell, because you cannot have an advanced society with zero economy. And there is not much that's left propping Israel up as a system, as a society. That article there did a great point of giving just a few little steps that it would take for it officially to be done, at least economically. So, and Netanyahu and the certain aspects of the Israeli government are pushing for a much broader war with Hezbollah and Iran and everything. Then Israel becomes even less safe because you're going to have Iranian missiles hitting regularly, and you're just going to see a mass flight out of Israel. And when you have no economy and half the number of people you used to have, it doesn't seem possible that Israel could continue, which is a good thing when you're a genocidal apartheid state. Sorry. If you weren't a genocidal apartheid state that stole all the land, then we'd talk. We have a discussion.